Democracy Prep at the Agassiz campus is a charter school in Las Vegas, and their motto, as you can see right here, is work hard, go to college, change the world. Their mission is to educate responsible citizen scholars for success in the college of their choice and a life of active citizenship. Just keep that little active word in mind for a second, because what's interesting about Democracy Prep to me is that I last week got an email from a frantic mother whose child is enrolled in this school, who is 17 years old, and who is being required to take coursework that is literally indoctrinating them into the social justice critical race theory ideology, and this work is required to graduate. It is required coursework to understand social justice and intersectionality and all those things. And the mother kind of emailed me frantically looking for help. And I said, well, can you show me what your kid is being taught? Because, there's all sorts of different levels of this, and I wanted to know what we're looking at. And, well, guys, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty shocked to see what a school is actually forcing 17-year-old kids to learn. Now, I'm going to show you exactly what these kids are being forced to learn, but I'm also just going to do a quick plug. Listen, guys, YouTube is really messing with my channel. They're demonetizing a lot of stuff wrongly. They are absolutely suppressing my content. They are absolutely unsubscribing people from my account. Just to give you a little context for this, this started on August 27th. I can actually pinpoint the date in my analytics. And I was getting between 500 and 1,000 new subs a day up until August 27th, when it all ground to a screeching halt. And right now I'm getting maybe 50 to 100 on a good day. This is I was getting 500 to 1,000 every single day consistently, unless I was on the news or something, and then it would spike up really high. And now all of a sudden this. So YouTube is really trying to screw me on this one. Now, I know YouTube because I'm going to show you content that is being taught to 17-year-olds in high school. I know you aren't going to demonetize this content because literally this is required learning for 17-year-olds, so it would seem that what I'm about to share would be appropriate for all audiences. Anyway, guys, if you want to help me out, if you want to fight back against YouTube not wanting you to see this type of content, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Please turn on notifications, leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, feed that algorithm, baby. Come on, I know we can do this. I'm not going to stop. YouTube can keep messing with me all they like. I'm not going to stop. Okay, so let's without further ado, let's dig into it and see what 17-year-olds are learning. I got a whole bunch of slides pulled right up here. We're just going to go slide by slide. Okay, vocab lesson. This is where they're defining just like words that you're going to see here. Traditional, derived from tradition. Liberal, open to political and social change. And then conservatives are defined as a person who favors maintenance of the status quo or reversion to some earlier status. That was actually kind of curious to me. Conservatives favor reversion to some earlier social status. Could that be saying that conservatives want to go back to the times before school integration and things like that? I'm gonna bet that's the case they're making. Let's keep going. Ideas to note. Values are the norms of the culture, but they are more global and abstract than norms. American culture equals conservative plus liberal elements, all this stuff. American culture, according to this slide, is a mishmash. What I really wanted to bring your attention to on this slide is this last bullet point. Since the late 1970s, the term traditional values has become synonymous with family values in the US and implies a congruence with mainstream Christianity. Okay. And then this little subpoint, however, family values is arguably a modern politicized subset of traditional values, which is a larger concept. So they're arguing that the family, the nuclear family, and the values that go with that is just a politicalized concept. They're teaching this to 17-year-olds. Ideology plus oppression. Okay, so this is where they start teaching the kids who is oppressed and who is not. So you know how sometimes I talk about how like there is a hierarchy of privilege. Traditionally, like black women are at the very top of, a hierarchy of like oppression, not of privilege. The black women are usually at the very top, and all the way down at the bottom are white men. White men have no oppression at all. In fact, they are the oppressors. That's what they're teaching here. So in order for ideology to work, there has to be a dominant group who then creates a submissive group. Dominant groups in American culture are white, male, middle/upper class, heterosexual, and Protestant or Christian. And then everyone else, the oppressed groups, are everyone else, known as marginalized groups or minorities. If you do not follow the status quo of norms of the dominant group, there are consequences. This is what they're teaching to 17-year-old kids. Let's keep going. Okay, now that we get into the types of institutions, and you're going to see why I wanted to spend a moment on this slide when we get to the next one. So family is when we get our first introductions. Schools, education-schools is where norms and values are reinforced. Religion and churches is where beliefs and taboos are reinforced, or like those are like the marginalized people, the taboos. Economic and work, Moore's Four Ways wage gap. They're actually teaching 17-year-old kids that the wage gap is a real thing, which it is not. We're going to talk about that later. And then government, political affiliation, reinforcement of norms nationwide. Now, let's check out how they're saying each of these groups creates oppression. So they're saying that the family reinforces racist/homophobic prejudices. The nuclear family reinforces racist/homophobic prejudices. Teaching this to 17-year-old kids. Education, money inequalities shine through resources and opportunities. Religion reinforces homophobic prejudices. Economic, the wage gap, again. Governmental promotes stereotypes and prejudices and normalizes it. And of course, they have this little sub-bullet right here, laws and law enforcement, who runs the country, that's going after the police pretty clearly. I mean, look at this. They're even using an image on here of a boot stepping on someone and someone trying to say, no, do not stomp on me, evil government institutions. 17-year-old kids are learning this. Required to learn it to graduate from high school. Oh, so now we get into the point where they start to create little activists among the 17-year-old kids. How do we fight back? Well, first you have to love and embrace yourself, which is actually true. By the way, everyone should love and embrace themselves. I don't actually have much of a problem with that. Continue to unlearn and educate yourself. Unlearn all those things that the family and education and religion and economics and the government has taught you. You need to relearn the new techniques that we are going to teach you. Use your voice and have conversations. Have struggle sessions, if you will, and then vote and get involved. Do you want to guess who they're promoting that these 17-year-old kids should vote for? Presumably when they turn 18, but who the heck knows? Next up, we have a quote from People of Color online classroom. Those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to make take our differences and make them strengths. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So what they've just taught people with that quote is that white people, white men specifically, let's go back to our little oppression hierarchy, white, male, middle and upper class, heterosexual, Protestant/Christian men are the masters. And when we're indoctrinating people, 17-year-olds, into this, 17-year-olds, by the way, the brains of 17-year-olds are not fully developed yet. They haven't fully developed the logic reason function of their brain. That doesn't actually happen until your early to mid-20s. And so I keep reinforcing the age here because people at 17, yes, they might be 1 year away from adulthood technically, but they are still highly impressionable. The logic function of their brain is not there yet. It does not exist yet. So they're literally building this while their brain is still fully forming and telling them that white men are the masters and everyone else is, well, you know. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give YouTube any more opportunities to demonetize me than they already have. All right, internalized privilege. And just so you know, guys, the red lines in this, they're all things that I put there. Internalized privilege includes acceptance of a belief in the inherent inferiority of oppressed groups, as well as the inherent superiority or normalcy of one's own privilege group. So, you know what's funny? In White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo teaches there's nothing wrong with being a racist if you're white, because that's just how you're socialized, and there's nothing wrong with that. There should be no shame and, and all this stuff. And what this says, and this is the same ideology, the exact same one, is that internalized privilege includes a belief that people who look like you are superior and people who don't look like you are inferior. Folks, this is the very definition of racism. This is the very definition of it. And there are white kids learning this. There are white kids being taught in high school that they are racist. And this is required to graduate. This creates an unearned sense of entitlement among the members of the privileged group and can be expressed as a denial of the existence of oppression and as paternalism. So they're literally pulling the white fragility line. That's white fragility. Anytime you hear something like people are denying their privilege, that's white fragility. That's where that comes from. Okay. This stuff just absolutely floors me. It really does. We have a lot of unlearning to do. In order to eliminate institutional and ideological oppressions, we must undo and unlearn internalized beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that stem from oppression. Build community among people and its groups and support its leaders. Be proud of history, contributions, and potential. Develop strengths to challenge patterns that hold said group back and organize itself into an effective force of social change. They're literally creating little activists as a required course in high school to graduate. And I mean, even they're illustrating it here. They're literally changing these kids' brains. When kids are in these classes over and over and over and over and over again and hearing the same things over and over and over and over again and having to do exercises, we're going to talk about the exercises in a second, over and over and over again, folks, that literally changes your brain. It changes your brain. And it's hard to undo it once it's done. They're getting them even before college. Oppression is defined as the malicious or unjust treatment or exercise of power, because we all know that that's really what they care about at the end of the day. It's power, often under the guise of governmental authority. So oppression often comes under the guise of governmental authority or cultural. Oh, I have no idea how to say that word. I know I probably should know because they're teaching this to 17-year-old kids, but I have no flipping idea. Social identity examples: race, gender, social class, sexual orientation, disabilities, religion, age, and language. So they're teaching the intersectionality playbook there. Oh, and here's where we get into our exercises. These are actual exercises they're having these kids do. On a Google Doc, write out your own individual identity with all the lists. This list is private. Be honest, no one will see it. And then what really floored me is the teacher. This is the teacher. I covered up her name to give, because I'm going to be ethical about this when this high school is not. This teacher did her own as an example to the class. Her race: white, Irish, American citizen, gender, female, socioeconomic status, working class, sexual orientation, bisexual, disabilities, mental health. Why are teachers talking about their mental health problems to students? I'm just saying. Religion, agnostic, age 22. Obviously. Language, English. This is the teacher. And we're going to come back to this in a second because we're going to revisit this one, but for right now. Breakout, basically, so now they've done their little identity flowchart just like the teachers, and they're being encouraged to share it. Now notice in this one, this list is private. Be honest. No one else will see it. But then we get to an exercise where they're being encouraged to share it. They're being encouraged. Now, it says you don't have to share it, but how do you think that's going to feel? If you're in a breakout session and other people are sharing their identities, how do you think that's going to make kids feel? Discussion questions. How did this activity make you feel? Did you learn anything about yourself? Were you surprised with the amount of privilege or oppression that you have attached to your identities. Okay, so like okay, I know because of the makeup of this school, there is a significant amount of minorities that are taking this particular class. They basically just taught the black and brown people in this class who they claim to care about. They basically just taught them that they're oppressed. If they hadn't learned it already, they just got the message that they're actually oppressed in the required course that they need to take in their high school to graduate. Intersectionality. The interconnected nature of social categorization such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or advantage. And this one I highlighted because apparently they're talking about Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a leading scholar of critical race theory. They don't even try to hide it. This is the same content that the President of the United States just banned in the federal government because it is so harmful to people. It is harmful to people, and this is required learning for high school students to graduate. Do you guys understand why this mother emailed me completely livid about this? Let's keep going. Why is knowing your identity important? It gives you a sense of who you are based on your group memberships. So they literally are teaching kids that the only thing that matters about who you are is the color of your skin, your gender, your sexual orientation, whether or not you have a mental health problem or not. That's what they're teaching these kids. Guys, you're so much more than these immutable characteristics. And frankly, like, mental health problems most of the time are not actually immutable characteristics. You can change them, except when you're taught that they are just an internalized part of who you are. Empowerment. Own who you are. See? Like what I said, they're literally teaching these kids, if you have a mental health problem like depression or like ADD or anxiety, just own it, accept it. It's part of who you are. Guys, it doesn't need to be that way. It absolutely does not. Who you are gives you power even when others try to take it away from you. Others can never take away your power. Your power comes internally. Your power comes from you. Teaching kids that other people have power over you is a great way to set them up for a really, really, really disempowered life. It gives you a power against your oppressors. The only people who are oppressors are teachers like this 22-year-old who are teaching kids that they are oppressed when they might not even think that they are, until they have a teacher that teaches them, a teacher who they trust, a teacher whose job it is to be a mentor, whose job it is to facilitate their success in the world, is teaching them that they are oppressed. I loved this email she sent me from one of the teacher, the same teacher who you saw their list of, intersectionality. And the reason I want to show this is because this is an email from the teacher saying, hello, my wonderful social justice warriors. This teacher is indoctrinating her class to be social justice warriors. I got more. Racism equals prejudice plus power. Therefore, people of color cannot be racist. Can't make this stuff up. Teaching a high school class. People of color can't be racist. Sorry. Internalized. This is the type of impression works within the group who suffer the most from mistreatment. So this is where they start teaching people, oppress people that they internalize their own oppression. So what they're teaching here is that if you don't buy into this, so for example, you guys know, like, I'm friends with Brandon Strzok and Mikey Harlow from Walkaway, and they, after the Republican National Convention, they were leaving the White House and were the targets of a homophobic attack. And one of the things that Mikey told me is when he was coming out of the White House, there were a couple like gay men there who screamed, "You hate yourself! You hate yourself!" That's what they're talking about here. Is they're teaching these kids that people who are maybe in these marginalized groups but don't buy into it, who don't see themselves as oppressed, they're literally teaching them that they hate themselves. Oppressed people internalize the ideology of inferiority. They see it reflected in these institutions. They experience disrespect interpersonally from members of the dominant group. And they eventually come to internalize the negative message about themselves. Never mind that these are the ones that are actually teaching racism. Diverse, inclusive, accepting, welcoming, safe space for everyone except people who don't agree with this insane ideology. Here's another exercise. Now that you have labeled and identified your identity, time to reflect. Does that part of your identity have privilege or oppression attached to it? And so privilege is being defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. Oppression is being defined as malicious or unjust treatment or exercise of power, often under the guise of governmental authority or cultural or I don't know what that word is. I'm sorry. I know I should know that word, whatever. Okay, so again, this is the teacher. This is the teacher. I've covered up her name. This is the teacher. So under her race, she's white, so yes, she's in a position of privilege. Her gender, female, oppressive. She's just taught all the women in her class that they're oppressed. Socioeconomic status, working class, oppressive. She's just taught all of the poor or middle class kids in her class that they are oppressed. Sexual orientation, bisexual, both privilege and oppress. She's just taught all of the students in her class that are not heterosexual that they are at least partially oppressed. Disabilities, mental health, both privileged and oppressive. She's just taught all of the kids in her class that may struggle with depression, anxiety, any number of very curable things that they are, in fact, oppressed. Religion, agnostic. She's just taught all the non-Christians in her class that they are oppressed. Listen, folks, I am not a Christian. There is no type of oppression that I experience or that any of you experience who are not Christians. That's ridiculous. Age 22, both privileged and oppressive. I don't know what she means by that. Language, English, a position of privilege, obviously. So I've got a couple other slides here. We're going to go through these really quickly. These were actually just taken with the mother's camera. Reverse racism doesn't exist. Reverse racism is not real. Oppressive attitudes and behaviors are backed up by institutional arrangements. So what she's saying is that the government or your family or your church or any of those other institutions that we already saw, they back up the oppressive attitudes that exist. Sure, people of color can have prejudices against white people. However, these prejudices are severely punished by police, courts, and gangs of white people will come crashing down on those who were prejudiced against white people. The reverse is not the same. Really, because the only gangs of white people that I've seen lately are Black Lives Matter protesters. Therefore, the oppressed groups do not have the power to enforce prejudices, unlike the dominant group who have the power. In this one, she's trying to make the case that because Black people are incarcerated at a higher rate, then that is proof of government oppression. Not looking at any other factors, just this is proof of government and the police oppression of Black people. In this one, I've actually used this chart before in like an article I wrote for Forbes about how the wage gap doesn't exist. They're actually teaching them that the gender wage gap exists. Guys, the gender wage gap doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because it's not accounting for all the different factors like the number of hours worked, the type of position it is, the type of industry that you're in. When you account for those factors, the gender wage gap becomes almost non-existent. And then when you teach women how to negotiate, because women negotiate at a much lower rate than men do over their salaries, it basically goes to zero. The gender wage gap is not a real thing, and it certainly should not be being taught to high school students as a requirement to graduate. Institutional examples of this is of the different types of oppression that exists. More institutional examples. If a policy unintentionally reinforces and creates new inequalities between privileged and non-privileged groups, it is still considered institutional oppression. They're looking at laws, legal system, police practice, basically teaching them that the police are bad. And then just reinforcing the dominant groups. Characteristics from our society. The dominant groups, the privileged groups, are seen as more intelligent, harder working, stronger, more capable, more notable, more deserving, more advanced, chosen, normal, superior. Isn't it a little bit racist and sexist and misogynist to say that white men are all of those things? I don't think white men are smarter than me or harder working than me or stronger or more capable or more noble. I don't think any of those things are true. Why are we teaching kids that they are? And then the submissive groups, they're teaching kids that if you belong to a submissive group, You're seen as stupid, lazy, weak, incompetent, worthless, less deserving, backward, abnormal, or inferior. They're teaching these kids racism. They're teaching these kids bigotry. That's what they're doing. So the mother that sent me all these materials, she did it after having a conversation with the executive director of the school in which she demanded that her 17-year-old kid be removed from this class and it not be a requirement to graduate. Well, here is the letter that she just got last week. She has given me permission. I made sure, she gave me permission to share this. So I'm going to share the letter. Here is what the executive director of this school wrote. Dear Mother, thank you for engaging with me during our conversation on Tuesday. Per our conversation, I am writing to provide a formal decision to your request to have your son removed from the Sociology of Change course. After reviewing all of the documents from her son, the course syllabus, and hearing your concerns, I have determined that the Sociology of Change course is still a valuable learning experience for your son and his classmates and will continue to be a required course for his graduation from DPAC. As noted in my follow-up to her son, DPAC must be a safe, inclusive, and respectful environment for all scholars. We welcome civil, academic, and social discourse. Moreover, our scholars' ability to understand others' points of view and evolve their thinking is a critical skill to develop. We hope that by the scholars in the Sociology of Change course, continuing to engage with one another on a variety of topics where scholars may have varying opinions. Our oh my God, scholars. Our scholars will be able to better engage in the discourse as they build coalitions around their communities. First of all, this executive director needs to learn how to write, and he needs to learn how to use a different word. At Democracy Prep, our mission is to educate responsible citizen scholars for success in their college of their choice and a life as an active citizenship. In short, we expect scholars to, they use their motto, work hard, go to college, and change the world. They're literally saying that they're training little activists. In order to prepare scholars for these tasks, we need to provide experiences on campus that allow scholars to practice their necessary skills to achieve that lofty goal. The Change the World project is an opportunity for our seniors to demonstrate their mastery of the required skills of problem identification, solution design, coalition building, and project execution. Training little activists. The Sociology of Change course is intrinsic to their success in completing the project. In the class, they are exposed to social change and social movement theory. The analysis of social change movements and theory is integral to their growth and execution of their projects. So they're doing more projects around this than I have access to already. I continue to stand behind the Change the World project and the associated Sociology of Change course. If you have questions about my decision or further want to discuss how we can provide a safe and welcoming environment for your son and his classmates, please do not hesitate to contact me. Yep. I don't have good advice to give you guys if you find your kids in this position. I don't have kids. I don't know what it's like to deal with schools who are forcing 17-year-old kids to be indoctrinated into little activists, to teach them that they are racist, to teach them that they are oppressed, it absolutely blows my mind. It really does. It's so sad. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Make sure you know what your kids are learning. If you have kids, make sure you know what they're learning. Do what this mother did, because this mother can have conversations with her kid at home. Listen, I did a video on this channel maybe like 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, where teachers, when their parents are like red pilling their kids and teaching them about actual things instead of nonsense, teachers feel that they have personally failed when they do not get their little activists when kids red pill. Teachers feel they personally failed. Well, I'm sorry, folks. It is not the job of teachers to be parents to your kids. This is teachers are not trustworthy. Teachers it is absolutely ridiculous. You've got to be in there. You've got to be teaching your kids. You've got to be talking with your kids. If you're going to send your kids to schools where this nonsense is required, then you've got to be there to explain to them why this is happening in the broader context. All right, guys, that's all I've got for this one. I'll see you soon.